Hi guys, I want to quickly go over an assignment that I gave you the week of April 6th to the 9th, which was a poem analysis. And the reason why I want to stop and do a quick video with you and go over this is to give you a little bit of feedback on how you did. I'll be posting the grades today. It's Sunday. I actually just got home from my Easter celebration with my parents and my kiddos. So, but I wanted to take a minute and record myself just talking about the poem because, as you know, Johnny and Ponyboy are at the church, and Ponyboy cites this poem. And if you know this book at all and you've read it before, and you'll probably find yourselves being able to also say this in the future, which is stay gold. Anybody who knows the book knows exactly what you're talking about. You are alluding to this poem by Robert Frost called Nothing Gold Can Stay. And the poem and this book have kind of started becoming synonymous with each other. Like if you know the book, you know the poem. If you know the poem, you know the book. And even if you don't really get into poetry and you don't quite understand, and maybe you completed the assignment for me and are still a little confused, let me explain a little about it and help you to see how powerful it was of the author to embed that poem right into the story. So on page 77, Johnny and Ponyboy are at the church, and there was just a really beautiful sunset. Now, if you remember, most of the greasers, it's like, cool sunset. And that's about as deep as it goes, right? It's not that any of them are dumb. It's just that they're not intellectual. They don't think deeply about things like nature and life, right? Ponyboy stands out very much from his gang, the Greasers, in that he's interested in reading and so interested intellectually in things that a sunset brings him to recall a poem he once read, and he then cites it to his friend who's like, what are you talking about? Let me read that little part of the story first before I explain the assignment and the significance of the poem. Again, I'm on page 77. The clouds changed from gray to pink, and the mist was touched with gold. There was a silent moment when everything held its breath. And then the sun rose. Excuse me, sunrise. I think I said sunset a moment ago. It was beautiful. Golly, Johnny's voice beside me made me jump. That sure was pretty. Yeah, I sighed, wishing I had some paint to do a picture with while the sight was still fresh in my mind. The mist was what was pretty, Johnny said, all gold and silver. I said, trying to blow a smoke ring. Too bad it couldn't stay like that all the time. Nothing gold can stay. I was remembering a poem I'd read once. What? Johnny's like, what are you talking about, right? Ponyboy says, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. Okay, sounds pretty enough, right? But what does it mean, and why is it important to this particular story? Let me help you. So I've got my worksheet on my computer open here. This is the worksheet that I gave you last week, okay? So the first thing it says on there is, number one, what do you think gold could be talking about? What different meanings could the idea gold have? And a lot of you answered this very well. Okay, so the gold is anything precious, right? It's a metaphor. So like, let's say maybe your dog is gold to you, your puppy, or your cat. Oops, my computer just shut off. My kids are gold to me, right? But my kids aren't going to stay little forever, and that doesn't mean they're not going to be precious to me anymore. But what they are right now is going to evolve. It's going to change, right? And maybe that's a bad example because I don't want to say that I'm not going to like treasure my kids forever. Obviously I will. So that's what the gold is referring to. It's a metaphor for anything that you find precious. And in this moment, the beauty of that sunrise is their gold, right? All right. Her hardest hue to hold. Nature's first green is gold. You know, this is a little tricky to teach when we're in the desert because we don't have a spring like a lot of the world does. where the snow melts away and then you start seeing all the bare branches get little buds of green, like they get these little tiny leaves. And you probably do see this on some trees here. Or maybe you notice it like if you have in your yard like some sort of plant that as it grows it gets the little green leaves and they're real shiny and young. Well, that's what it looks like in spring in other parts of the country where it isn't the desert after the snow melts. So that's nature's first green, are those little green buds telling you, oh my gosh, spring is coming, right? Winter is over. And that is gold. It's gold, right? Quote unquote, because it's so precious and exciting to people. And trust me, if you've never lived in the winter, that first green really is gold. Like, I can't tell you how many winters I spent in Montana growing up, and then you see like some little flower buds are green and you're like, oh my goodness, it's so good to see that after such a long cold winter. All right, I think I spent long enough on that first part of the poem. So the next part says, why do the leaf and flower only last an hour? And that's what it says. It says, her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. It's another metaphor, okay? So it's talking about how things like a flower, it doesn't bloom forever, right? It only lasts for a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, and it's something beautiful, and it's kind of bittersweet because it's like, you know, it's gonna die. You know that isn't gonna last forever, but it's so pretty and you wish it could last. All right, and I think a lot of you answered that really well as also. Number 3 from our worksheet was, what is Eden and how did it sink to grief? Okay, so if you are not familiar with like the Christian faith and the book that Christians use, which is the Bible, it's the most read book I think in the world. If you know not much about the Bible, you've probably heard of Eden and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden at the beginning of the Bible. And this is an illusion, you guys. We've talked about these before. It's figurative language. Anytime, especially poets, allude to another work of literature or book or song or play, it's an illusion, right? I think I gave you the example before of when somebody says, you're such a Scrooge. It's an allusion to Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, saying that you're like Scrooge, Uncle Scrooge, and you're greedy and don't share things. So this is an allusion to the Garden of Eden from the Bible, okay? And the Garden of Eden is in the Bible known as the original, first, most beautiful, perfect place. Everything was perfect in it, right? Well, if you don't know the story, Adam and Eve unfortunately make a bad choice, and then, you know, they end up being cast out of this beautiful garden. And so it doesn't last forever. And it's just kind of another metaphor for a human condition, which is that we encounter beautiful things in life, but they just often aren't going to last, unfortunately. I think we'd take them for granted if they did. It's kind of bittersweet, right? Okay, so that one might have been a little tricky for you if you weren't really sure about the Bible or the Garden of Eden. Not everybody's familiar with that. So, and then, oh, and by the way, on number 3, when it said, how did it sink to grief, Eden? It sank to grief because of Adam and Eve making a bad choice and sinning in God's eyes in the Christian faith. And so everything sank to grief. It all changed. They left. They now are, you know, full of shame. Okay. And then the last one, I'm not going to go over the rhyme scheme part of this because I honestly didn't think that was the most important part. Number 4 says, why can't anything gold stay? And why can't anything gold stay, you guys? I mean, I don't know. Like, you think about it. Think about one of those memories you have that is so precious, something super fun. Maybe it was a favorite birthday party. Maybe it was a really cool experience that you had somewhere, you know, on a road trip or on a family vacation. Maybe it's a friendship that you had and then the friend moved away and that friendship was gold and then your friend moved away and it, you know, it changed and maybe it ended, honestly. And I don't know that I have an answer for you as to why those things don't stay. But in this particular poem, when you're referring to nature's green is the gold, it can't stay because it's going to eventually bloom all the way through summer. And then what happens in the fall? Even if you live in the desert, you know, right? leaves start to fall off the trees, things start to go bare and dry. I mean, it's funny because in the desert, we actually get that in the summer when it's super hot and everything gets dehydrated and hot and dry. But anyway, I hope that helps you to understand this poem. And why is it significant here, though? Like, okay, cool poem, Mrs. Gutierrez, but what is the deal with it being in this book? I want you to think about how Johnny and Ponyboy are so close, right? Ponyboy really cares about Johnny, and I think Johnny cares about him a lot as well. And they have stood by each other through thick and thin. And when Johnny literally commits the ultimate horrible act in order to help his friend. I mean, what a sign of true support and love for your friend, to stick by them. And then when Ponyboy is about to be killed, Johnny kills the other guy, right? And then, of course, Ponyboy goes on the run with him. And they end up in this church. And although it's really hard surviving, they're having this really deep, close bond form while they're there, because they're living on bologna, reading books. And it's just those two, and they're talking a lot. And they're sitting there in that moment watching the sunrise, seeing how beautiful it is. Everything's very peaceful. But they know it's going to end. Because why? The cops are looking for Johnny, right? They know he killed somebody. So even though they're sitting there in that beautiful moment, just like nature's first green being gold, this moment with the sunrise with Johnny and Ponyboy, it can't end either. Nothing gold can stay. All right, I think I've talked enough for this video. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop and start a new video for you and read the next chapter. All right.